abortion pills in every state.
We're not anymore in the Middle Ages, 18th century. It's now, no matter what the court will decide, we will continue to provide abortions to women. Whether it's by mail, robots, it doesn't matter.
Dr. Rebecca Gomperts is talking to our producer in her Amsterdam office, beating back jet lag. She's just gotten back from outside the U.S. Supreme Court, where she was helping robots, as in robots, manned from states with laws that protect abortion rights, to prescribe abortion pills to passersby.
We have someone, an activist, is taking mifepristone live in front of the Supreme Court.
And the message with the robot was, we won't go back. We will only move forward.
The Dutch doctor and abortion activist has been engaging in these kind of creative campaigns that blur borders to abortion access for decades. And unlike that trip to the Supreme Court, some of her most famous campaigns have actually taken her by boat. Her second campaign on a ship went to Poland back in 2003.
It was a very interesting campaign. Poland had just had a referendum to let it join the EU. And Poland banned abortion in 1993, so only 10 years earlier. And it was impossible for us to find any doctor that was willing to speak openly about supporting abortion rights. We knew, of course, that there was a huge underground market. Abortions were done underground in clinics. And so when the ship arrived in Poland, it was a huge protest from the anti-abortion groups. It was very intimidating. The ship came in and they tried to chain the ship and we had to pay a fine. And then many women started calling us and even coming to the ship spontaneously. And so we were able to sail out 3 times. I think what was most important actually is that we raised awareness for the abortion bill. What was concerning is that at the end, after the ship left, everybody that sailed on board was requested for questioning with the police. We had really good lawyers stand by, so everybody was prepared, guided, and nobody was really scared of it, which was really very moving as well. But it was an intimidation tactic.
This boat tour hammered something home for her, something that she'd been researching for a while.
It's just a bill. You must be able to send it to people, to mail it to people.
If she could do that, then women would be able to control their pregnancies no matter what happened to the laws in their own countries. It was a natural extension of what she was already doing.
Trying to find the loopholes in the law and to show the discrepancies, yeah? The problem with abortion is that it's very underground, it's very private, it's a personal experience. In a sense, you're showing the ridiculousness of trying to impose a ban on abortion. Hey, here in Germany it's legal, in Poland it's illegal, it's ridiculous. You can fly a drone over and it's 100 meters farther and then it's legal and it's illegal and you play with these concepts.
More than 20 years since Rebecca Gomperts was on that boat, abortion laws in Poland are even stricter than they were before.
Terminations will only be permitted when the mother's life or health is at threat, or in cases of rape or incest.
But some feminists hope that they're on the cusp of change. What did it take to get there? And what does something so personal tell us about foreign policy? I'm Lacey Healy, and this is Things That Go Boom.
Hi, I'm Tyler Foggett. Join me and my colleagues as we go beyond the headlines and deepen your understanding of the forces shaping our world today on The Political Scene, a newly updated podcast from The New Yorker. With episodes 3 times each week, The Political Scene accesses the sharpest minds in politics for insight and analysis about everything, from abortion rights to the war in Ukraine. Make sure you're following The Political Scene, available now wherever you get your podcasts.
These are the abortion pills that I told you about that I have from our group that are like an emergency stuff.
That's Wiktoria Szymczak. She's an abortion doula, part of a network that helps women in Poland skirt the law and get legal abortions. See, there's no law against women in Poland managing their own abortion or going abroad to obtain one. Her clients usually order their own abortion pills in the mail. Wiktoria talks them through the process when they end their pregnancies, either online or in person, with a hot water bottle and snacks. And if the abortion is more emotional, or it needs to happen later in the pregnancy, she helps women go further afield.
Here we have our hotline. Here we have the website that we're on right now. Here we have Ciocia Basia.
Ciocia Basia means Auntie Barbie. It's the code name for their contacts in Berlin.
So it's for Germany, abortions in Germany. Here we have Ciocia Czesia because Czech Republic. So this is for the Czech Republic, our contact. Ciocia Wienia from Austria.
A few months ago, it looked like Wiktoria might not have to do this much longer. Poland had contentious elections that brought a new left-leaning prime minister into power, Donald Tusk, who campaigned promising to make abortion legal up to 12 weeks in Poland, something that hadn't been seen in 30 years. But today, the question of whether Polish women will get abortion rights is still up in the air.
The Polish parliament has voted to end the country's near-total abortion ban.
The first time since the 90s that such a law about abortion is being discussed in the second reading.
Nothing is really expected to change anytime soon. A number of politicians would not vote to change the law. One of them is the president, who has the power of veto.
No matter what the commission will do, it will be blocked in the end by the presidential veto, at least until the end of his mandate, meaning in May 2025.
The other is the Speaker of Parliament, who has already banned abortion advocates from even entering the gallery in the Parliament to attend the debate today.
In the midst of all of this politicking, Wiktoria is focusing on what she can control.
We have to work on our network, making it more accessible, making it more known. Even if people don't want to use it right now, they need to know that there is something like that. Some people just text me and they're like, hey, I don't want to get an abortion, but I want to know where to get one. So I'm texting you so you're saved in my messages. And I'm like, yeah, okay, see you. It's very sad, but there's just no hope left in me that it's going to change.
Professor Hanna Muellenhoff told us that foreign policy movements can learn from the creativity of people like Wiktoria and Rebecca.
Civil society activists around reproductive rights have organized, have campaigned, have emphasized also the intersectionality of these rights. I think these are all points where governments or foreign ministries can learn what it actually means to do feminist politics more generally. Foreign policy is very hierarchical. It's done towards others. But from a feminist perspective, it should be about creating alliances. It should be on equal footing. It should be learning from each other. And it shouldn't be teaching the others, so to say. It requires some maybe humility in terms of also the governments in the global north to learn from others and not to assume, which is often wrong assumption that everything's perfect here when it comes to gender. And we have to tell others how to do things. Instead, we see a lot of challenges to gender equality and LGBTQI rights and abortion rights within Europe, within the US. And I think it's even more important than to engage with others in a different way that is more oriented towards also learning from each other how to deal with these challenges. Feminist movements, I think, have shown how to do that again and again.
Because this back and forth over abortion in Poland is wrapped up in a bigger debate about what kind of role that Poland is going to play in the world.
Abortion rights are used to create a certain sense of national identity or to differentiate yourself from what is considered to be European woke other states that are too liberal or too LGBTQI friendly, because these things are often linked. The previous Polish government did that. The Hungarian government is doing that. They are trying to differentiate themselves from the rest of the EU and other EU projects that they see as having gone too far and being too anti-family, being out of control.
In 2020, back when Poland was dominated by the right-wing Law and Justice Party and Donald Trump was president of the United States, the two countries signed a treaty called the Geneva Consensus before the UN, saying that there is no international right to abortion. More than 30 countries signed this document, including Viktor Orban's Hungary and Lukashenko's Belarus, even though abortion is actually legal in both of those countries.
We do see that a key issue for these anti-democratic, anti-liberal movements in Europe are questions of gender. I'm not sure whether they really care about it so much, but it's definitely a way how they try to mobilize people The other way around, France, they just enshrined the right to abortion in their constitution, even though there's still a limitation on when you can have an abortion. But Macron has also said France is not going to stop before the right to abortion is kind of respected everywhere. So it seems like it's become some sort of a national project as well. In these ways, I do think it comes into kind of identity and foreign policy.
I mean, just look at us in America, right? Back in 1973, just months after Roe v. Wade, anti-abortion activists organized. They successfully lobbied Congress to pass the Helms Amendment, which forbade American aid money to be spent on abortion care abroad. It's a move that the Guttmacher Institute says kills 17,000 women a year. And 11 years later, Ronald Reagan enacted the Mexico City policy, sometimes referred to as the global gag rule, which went even further, saying that there could be no U.S. funding for groups abroad that even performed abortions or lobbied for abortion rights with other countries' money. These days, each time a Democrat comes into office, they strike this law down, and when a Republican comes back, they put it back into play. It was one of Donald Trump's first moves, and it led several of our European allies, like the Dutch and the Danes, to pull together hundreds of millions of euros for the Global South to support reproductive rights abroad.
We see how conversations in the US also get picked up in Europe. They're very much linked.
But it's not just Americans influencing the conversation.
My name is Anna Gierewska, and I'm editor-in-chief of V-Square, that is a Central European investigative outlet.
In 2020 and 2021, Anna's team published a series of investigations into ultra-conservative networks fighting against gender rights throughout Europe. These were folks that were lobbying countries against ratifying agreements like the Istanbul Convention Against Domestic Violence. And what they found was that former members of anti-abortion groups went on to take key roles in Poland's administration. They also found that the Polish government took its vision of the family further abroad, pushing nearby Central European countries to join in tightening their own laws on abortion rights.
We found out that there is nothing ad hoc about this expansion.
When Poland restricted abortion access in 2020, it also became a kind of North Star for anti-abortion activists globally who had supported the cause. A reminder that they could swing big and win. But Polish groups weren't just along for the ride here. One group, the Piotr Skarga Foundation, was sending big money to support anti-abortion groups outside the country.
What we found out, that was kind of surprising, that the organization based in the Polish city of Krakow, that was part of the traditional family property network, was actually was the key organization in this network, both providing this business model and pattern for collecting donations for other sister organizations across Europe and transferring hundreds of thousands, millions of euros to other organizations from Sao Paulo to France to other European destinations. They also co-created some of those organizations, becoming board members and so on. So they were basically setting up the sister organizations. So there was this high level, I would say, of coordination within the movement and also coordination when it comes to their agenda.
In other words, as Polish officials cracked down on abortion at home, the networks that they worked with were exporting this same vision of gender and family abroad. But as this lobby against abortion began to put Poland on the map in this way, women across the country had another idea. That's after the break. In 2020, a constitutional court in Poland, stuffed with political appointees, struck down one of the few loopholes for women to get abortions in the country, related to fetal abnormality, meaning that women could be forced to carry non-viable fetuses to term. For many women who'd been seeing abortion laws liberalized around the world, that set something off.
The protests we had in 2020 were very violent, with the police, with the clashes and tear gas being used, people being arrested.
That's Klementyna Suchanow. She's the organizer of the women's strikes in Poland that hit the streets demanding abortion rights. And when she was organizing these protests, she would sometimes notice some stuff that she found weird.
People coming to us and saying, listen, you should do things this way or that way, like coming from nowhere as advisors.
Advising her and other organizers to ratchet up the violence in the streets.
So that we act in a more also violent way in order to protect us.
Klementyna didn't want to do that.
My daughter was there, so how could I invite her to fight with the police? It was unbelievable.
Activists have these kind of debates over tactics all the time. But what about the Spanish reporter who came by to do a story on the movement?
He was coming to our office. He was looking around. He was interviewing us and recording.
Today, he's in jail, being investigated for accusations that he was a spy for the GRU, Russia's security agency.
I'm sure there were attempts to infiltrate us. Russian infiltration is getting into very spontaneous and very true, authentic movements.
Klementyna knows better than anyone that this infiltration can go both ways. She's the author of a controversial book called This Is War, which investigated anti-abortion groups in Poland. The book found links between members of the Polish anti-abortion movement and Kremlin-backed Russian oligarchs and activists, as well as prominent Americans close to former U.S. President Donald Trump. It also led to a defamation lawsuit from a prominent conservative legal group in Poland called Ordo Juris, which advocates for more restrictions on abortion. This lawsuit is still ongoing. But just this month, she analyzed a new trove of leaked emails for the news site Onet.
My recent investigation together with other journalists from other European countries is about the so-called Agenda Europe, which, as we have proof, is infiltrated by the Russian actors working together with American radical people from extremist religious organizations.
These emails showed Russians trying to influence leaders in Europe's anti-abortion movement, including top members of Ordo Juris. In the email list, Russians encouraged activists to avoid certain topics and asked them for help with others. Pavel Parfentyov, he's been singled out by the Free Russia Forum as a propagandist promoting the war in Ukraine. He made plans with Ordo Juris as president at the time to promote their vision of sexual education and reproductive rights at the UN.
We were always told that feminism is a political issue. And I always say that in our times, feminism is a geopolitical issue. It's exploited by one country like never before, and we should be aware of it.
When we asked, Ordo Juris's chairman told us that, quote, Agenda Europe is nothing more than one of many mailing lists that dozens of people have joined and dozens have left. That he didn't get an impression that the Russians were controlling or influencing the discourse, that Klementyna's article was full of unfair insinuations, and that mistrust of Russia is something that unites the right and left in this part of Europe. Just next door, a Ukrainian chapter of Ordo Juris was one of the first groups to investigate Russian war crimes. But he also said that sometimes the mailing list became a place for disputes where, quote, it took several times to dispel the illusions of some circles who believed that Russian propaganda aimed at conservatives was sincere.
Whatever divides the West plays in Russia's hand.
Anna Giluska says that Russia benefits when Poles fight over abortion.
Women's rights, traditional family and pro-family politics are one of the very polarizing topics, and in that way very effective as a narrative used for the Kremlin campaigns or influence operations.
Other political experts have described how Putin relies on an image of a chaotic, degenerate West, battling a traditional Russia for the soul of Ukraine.
It was Mephistophelic, I would say.
As in the trickster demon Mephistopheles, changing shape to get his way.
Turning us into discussions about abortion while at the same time Russia was preparing to the war. We were debating abortion issues for the last years, not thinking of what's going on across our border.
Meanwhile, Polish government officials were building relationships with the anti-abortion movement as reporters and researchers published concerns about Russia trying to influence these movements in Europe. Which is funny because, as Ordo Juris's chairman pointed out, there's one thing that both the left and right in Poland usually agree on. Pretty much everybody hates Russia. But that also means that pretty much everyone who does something that you don't like is accused of being a Russian plant, including Klementyna. Ordo Juris's chairman wanted us to know that she went to Moscow and met a suspected Russian spy. She says that she was in Moscow, but doing research for her book and speaking at an event. and that she never actually met that person. And in this kind of no-you climate, it makes sense that politicians who wanted more restrictions on abortion just treated any talk of Russia like background noise.
Today, when I'm talking to some of those guys from the other side, they admit that they just felt like they are doing such a very important thing, trying to achieve their goals, that they didn't treat it seriously or not seriously enough.
In other words, Klementyna is saying that this goal to make Poland a model for anti-abortion efforts, it started coming at the expense of fighting foreign influence wherever it might show up.
They felt like this is the usual buzz that's always going around very important issues, very important projects, that this is a part of what you have to pay for it.
But we also shouldn't overstate the Russian narrative here. Foreign influence can only fan the flames if there's a real fire at home. Hanna Muellenhoff says that for many conservatives in Europe, this effort becomes a question about how they see Europe's future.
The right-wing party group in the European Parliament, they are actually often legitimizing their positions with references to European values, just that they have a different understanding of European values.
Hanna teaches European studies at the University of Amsterdam. And she says that the EU has this reputation of being this super liberal body, reminding member states to protect feminism, LGBT rights, minority rights. But EU elections are coming up in June, and far-right parties are expected to make gains across the continent. Even though abortion rights aren't in the EU umbrella, that could change the dynamic for reproductive justice activists. Big time.
I was actually looking also at research on the debate of this resolution that the European Parliament passed on access to abortion as a right. And there I read that a lot of MEPs from the right wing actually were doing exactly that. They were saying European values are connected to family values, etc. So they were legitimizing anti-abortion positions with reference to European values. And we've seen this also with reference to European cultural heritage and Christianity, etc. So it is possible, of course, to connect very conservative positions to kind of a narrative of European identity and history.
And there's a limit to how much the union can respond.
On the EU level, there's also no treaty. It's also not enshrined in the EU's Charter of Fundamental Rights. There's no right to abortion in EU law. There's also no right to sexual and reproductive health in EU law. Hence, the EU also doesn't really have any competence and doesn't have a clear mandate also to promote it.
These divisions, they have the potential to further destabilize the EU at a time when it's already increasingly fractured, and Euroscepticism is on the rise, and at a time when America needs a reliable, strong European ally. And Hanna says that while the right wing is pushing on gender issues, liberals at the top, they aren't really pushing back.
We see across Europe more broadly, the center-left parties are trying to take up even certain positions, I would say, of the right-wing groups. They're not taking up the anti-gender positions, etc., but they're hoping by not talking about these issues and centering other questions such as migration and security to somehow distract from that, so not to politicize it also further. I mean, it's a strategic choice in a way.
So it's ultimately shifting everybody to the right.
In my view, it's shifting everyone to the right, indeed. We've also seen, interestingly, maybe it's a little outside, but another example of this is, for instance, in the Netherlands, they have been developing a feminist foreign policy, but it was not brought into the election campaigns in any way. And from what I've heard and understood, this is also out of this fear of that this might get politicized.
And this fear of feminist foreign policy becoming politicized, we see it in how centrist parties and governments talk about abortion.
While we see this huge relevance of the question of abortion, definitely in US media, but also put forward by these right-wing groups and movements in Europe, actually abortion is super popular, let's say. Also in Europe, surveys show that most people agree to the right to abortion in most cases, which raises some questions about how it's presented sometimes as an issue that people don't agree on, and how also politicians seem to perceive it as a very sensitive issue that don't want to talk about it.
Klementyna knows that there's still lots of power struggling ahead, but that's not dampening her confidence. A recent survey showed that only 14% of Polish people like the existing law.
We did win and we are winning. That's definitely the case.
And she doesn't really feel like they needed a feminist foreign policy to get there. What she needed was a foreign policy that was indebted to feminists.
I am fighting with dangerous people, in fact, and I feel that in such a moment we should unite. I wouldn't say that it's a feminist foreign policy that's needed. It's a reasonable foreign policy that's needed that includes feminism as part of it. So this is actually the attitude of the real patriotic conservative guys today should be to stand together with the feminists, so-called feminism, whom usually they disregard or take for crazy, because this is a safety issue. And exactly those two societies should be working together today if they don't like their countries to be weakened by a foreign actor.
Before I let you go, we reached out to the U.S. State Department with a few questions about this episode. Namely, how the U.S. was handling the issue of anti-abortion movements, including Russian actors with connections to the Kremlin. We also asked if the Helms Amendment empowers these actors abroad, and if there has been any discussion about changing how the Helms Amendment is interpreted to give our partner organizations abroad more flexibility so that we don't do that. The department declined to comment, both on or off the record. In our next episode, what would a feminist foreign policy do differently when it comes to the climate?
The thing that overwhelmingly we see again and again is that women's rights per se does not protect women, right? Can't protect women.
Things That Go Boom is distributed by Inkstick Media and PRX. If you like what we do, you can find more at inkstickmedia.com or on social at inkstickmedia. And we always love a good review, so please hop on over and give us one if you feel like doing so. This episode was produced by Katie Toth and edited by Amy Drozdowska and Nikki Galtland. The music for our show is written by Darian Schulman, and Robin Wise is our engineer. Thanks, as always, to the supporters and foundations that make our work possible. The Carnegie Corporation of New York and Plowshares Fund, as well as Inkstick supporters, including the Cologne Foundation, Craig Newmark Philanthropies, Prospect Hill Foundation, and the Jubitz Family Foundation. We'll see you all in 2 weeks.
Look at our new little friend, the robot. How cute. Hi, buddy.